This is Laserlight Presents All About the Gig.
All right, back again. Today we have another special guest, recording, performing artist, Devin Krueger. How you doing?
Doing well today.
Good, good. And of course, today's wingman for this episode with me, Dave Sorelli. How you doing, Dave?
Doing well, man.
Cool. Devin, I used up all my good questions for Dave. No, okay. Okay. So this is going to be Dave's cast. No. Right. Yeah, let's dive in. I've got some key points here. I would like to know a little bit more about you and past, present, and future. Stuff like that. I like this question because it gives me insight, and I always think back to the moments that turned for me for when I would just have music as a background, cannon fodder type thing, and then all of a sudden I started listening and I started latching on. When did you start playing an instrument?
I started playing in first grade is when that's when I started taking piano lessons.
Okay.
So I took piano lessons in first grade, and then by by elementary school, I was in band and I played marching snare and the bell kit in our little school orchestra at the time. Mm-hmm. And then by junior high, I was back into doing piano because I had stopped taking piano lessons like in 4th and 5th grade. Mm-hmm. And then I started taking piano lessons again, but that's also when I started going to local art school in town, which I went through 6th through 12. Mm-hmm. And that opened up my eyes to a ton of things because one of the big things of their program was you could have a discipline in high school, but in junior high, you had to do everything. So you had like a 2-hour block for 6th through 8th grade where you would do a semester of music, a semester of dance, a semester of art, and a semester of theater. Mm-hmm. And right there, I got put through the ringer in music theory classes as part of the music, as well as obviously piano. And then I started taking guitar classes there, which is around the same time I got guitar when I was in 6th grade. Mm-hmm. So that kind of ballooned forward into me playing.
Do you think it's important for everyone to start on the piano? If, not everyone, but you think that's a good starting point? I noticed, Dave, there were some parallels into your story.
If you don't start with it, you're going to have to pick it up at some point.
Really?
It's imperative that you understand the mechanics of it, because for composition and for just sheer tactile, presentability, it's a universal instrument.
Yeah. And how was your experience, Devin, with your first teachers?
It was great. I couldn't have asked for a better teacher because I didn't get one of these old stuffy people who are constantly correcting your posture and your fingering and all this. And this is the way to practice. You will do these drills and you will run it this way. Right. I ended up getting a gentleman, and I'll do a shout out, Cy Winnie, who was my first piano teacher. And then years later at a completely different store, I went to go get piano lessons again, and he happened to be the piano instructor. And that's when I realized how lucky I'd been at a young age that I had gotten such a fantastic improviser and very open player who was also a wealth of information, because as this little first grader who was learning how to play the Batman theme song, I remember that specifically. He taught me how to play the Batman theme song, and I learned it was kind of funny because this is not what you expect out of a 6-year-old, but the very first things I remember being able to play were the 1, 4, and 5 of that tune, and then the C minor pentatonic along with the E flat major, but C minor scale. I didn't even learn a C major scale, which should be the easier one, right? You learn the white keys. Yeah. Nope, I learned E flat major. I learned Batman theme song because I think he realized right away that my attention span wasn't good enough to do a drill. So he had to get me on a song and get me hooked on something I could just play over and over again. And right away I would start messing with it. I would play the bridge section twice as long, or I would try and add other notes from the notes he'd given me. So I got set up with someone who realized that I was someone who wanted to play around with things.
Yeah.
And
let me ask you real quick. Do you recall? Did you take to the playing as well as the the definitions of things equally so? Were you able to absorb, these terms and phrases, that you're using now with, the pentatonic and the, did that come as equally as interesting?
I didn't know it then. Back then, I was only learning how to read. So I was learning how to read, and when I'm saying C minor pentatonic or something like that, I didn't know the name for the scale at the time, but I remember learning that this succession of notes on the piano together is a sound. And I remember knowing that if I kept these 7 notes together and kept repeating them, so if I go white key, black key, white key, white key, white key, black key, black key, then I'd be. Oh. And I knew that fingering, and I knew that all sounded together. And I remember learning that.
How did you practice? Did you guys have a piano at the house?
I did. I had a keyboard.
Did you? Oh,
so
keyboard.
Just a little cheap keyboard at the time. I don't
was
even
that the
remember what it was.
same in your scenario, Dave? You always have that. Some people don't have that.
I started on a keyboard, and then my parents were actually looking for like an upright piano for a fixture in the house. So it actually worked out auspiciously that they were able to find that, and then I had a more legitimate instrument to practice on.
So when did your ear start to, Devin, pay closer attention to the guitar? Do you recall when?
I remember the moment.
Yeah, I know. Hey, do you remember when? You know what I mean?
I was at my dad's for the summer in Virginia, and I remember someone who's legally related to me by some way. I don't know. Let's call him a cousin.
Sure.
He had a Stratocaster sitting in his room, and he didn't play it at all. And I don't think it was even tuned. It didn't matter because I never picked up a guitar, as far as I know. There's pictures of me as a baby with a guitar. I had a grandpa who played one, but let's just say, for all intents and purposes, this is my first memories of holding a guitar.
This is your moment, right?
And I remember I just started to try and make riffs on the low E string, and I started making up little ideas on that. And he was like, "Do you play guitar?" And I was like, "I've literally never held a guitar in my life." And I just remember having a lot of fun messing with just one string.
Yeah.
Unplugged. No amp, no nothing. I'm just playing this thing on the floor. And the very next, after that summer is when I started going to TSA, the art school, and they had guitar program. And I was like, I need to do that immediately. And for whatever reason, the way the school scheduling worked, 6th graders couldn't take guitar classes. So I just begged my parents, get me a guitar for my birthday and Christmas this year, because my birthday's in November. So I was like, Can we combine those? I would die to have a guitar. And I got a BC Rich Warlock, big old X-shaped guitar. That phase didn't last too long, but when you see 40 guitar players at your school, of only 500 by the way, so a good chunk of the population, all have guitars, and all of them have Esquire Affinity and Tobacco Burst. You want the other thing. You want the other thing that's also $100.
Sure.
That's what I got. And and then I took private lessons at the school for a year until I could start taking classes, actually. But to go back and answer your question, the definitions and stuff didn't bother me, and I jumped onto it pretty quickly. Now, I did do the thing, which was I interpreted everything my own way, which became a running joke in high school, which was, well, everyone, we can do this, or you can do it the Devin way, and they would make a joke about it, because I would interpret theory in my own way and apply things. And
it was effective.
I was really good with math growing up, and I was always a math and reading tutor growing up. So I think some of that analytical part fit with me, and I know not everybody views it this way, but I've always thought of music theory as this fantastic set of like puzzle pieces that all fit together, and it's really fun to find out the other combinations where things all fit together. So I liked that challenge, and it made sense to me to kind of put those all together. And make sense of them.
Well, that's a pretty cool background, man. That's very insightful. What would you lend to someone who's beginning in that sense, right? Where you were when they've made that recognition I think this is for me. You know, and it could be at any age, really. You know, what would you lend to them? You know, if you could, you know, someone who's they definitely know that they're gonna pursue this.
Yeah.
You know, at least to see if they can pass or fail at it. Right.
What I would definitely say is that the biggest thing is, and this can just sit in the back of your head, is that if you want to do this, nothing will stop you.
Yes.
Everyone can tell you it's the wrong decision. Everyone can tell you should do something different. You yourself can think that this is not the smartest decision you should do with your life. All these other things can happen, and you will still find yourself doing it anyways. It's one of those things that it becomes like an inevitability that like you just can't stop yourself.
Sure.
And the moment for me was when I was a week into engineering school, and I think I might have told this story before, so I'll make it quick. But basically, I realized I'm going to get home every day from school, and as soon as I do the bare minimum to pass, I'm going to be playing guitar and looking at guitar videos and looking at pedals and doing songs.
Yeah.
And when I get a job in this field, I'm going to get out every Friday as soon as I can so I can go play with my band and do this. And I was just realizing that I'm never going to take any of my careers super seriously because I'm going to do everything I can to get it out of the way so I can go back to doing this thing instead.
Yeah.
And I was just realizing there's this like dread that was coming over me to realize how miserable I was going to be not being able to do the thing that I wanted to do instead.
That's a familiar feeling to probably almost everyone at some point in their life with something.
Yeah.
So it's recognizable, you know, and you can address it, you know, personally and know.
At some point, and, you know, I've had this conversation with other musicians and they laugh and they agree with me that I was always like, when it comes down to it, it's me, this guitar on the side of the road if it has to be. Because I will follow that trajectory all the way down to that point if need be, and then carry myself back up hopefully to wherever that will go. But I said, when all else fails in life, it is me and this, and that's the way I'm going to live my life.
Yeah. First band.
Yeah.
What was your first band?
My first real band outside of school, because the funny thing is with the way that we had opportunity set up, is I was playing live gigs and I was playing paying gigs since about 14, because we had a lot of summer programs and school programs. During the year, we didn't get paid.
Okay.
That was just class. But during the
that
summer,
could be mix and matches.
Yeah, that was jazz and pop combo and all kinds of things. And I was really into theater and dance and art at the time too. I was doing a lot of things. I just enjoyed being creative and performing and doing things. And funny enough, one of the things that pushed me into music was realizing that it was the only career out of all of these other ideas where I wouldn't be timed out by age. And I wouldn't be timed out by looks, and I wouldn't be timed out because you just don't happen to fit the part, unlike a lot of other fields in the arts. Sure. That I was like, if I actually get good at this, you can keep doing it. And you can do it till the day you die, basically. I'm like, there's guys who sit there and they still play their little corner gig when they're 80 years old and the community still loves them. And I was like, this has staying power. Out of all the other things that were interesting me, this has staying power, and I should pursue that deeper.
Well, think about, you stroll through, a museum, I mean, there's something going on around a campfire on the earliest cave drawings. You know what I mean? I think music stood the test of time, right? So what a solid thought. This isn't going anywhere,
So anyway, so I was playing a lot, which was great. But my first real band was a band called Bending the Bricks, which I joined in because I was in a trig class with the drummer. And the day before a blues competition, they were like, our singer quit. Hey, you sang in the musical like last week. You sing. Like, could you do this with us tomorrow? Yeah. We're having a rehearsal tonight. And the band was Midnight Blue the day before. And when I came to rehearsal that day, we became Benny and the Bricks.
Yeah.
We did the competition. We won. We went to Memphis. We did it again the following year. And those two events kind of solidified that band as a big thing. Which was great because we did that, and we did big benefit raisers and raise a couple grand to pay for us to go to Memphis and compete and do stuff. And that was amazing because it's an international event. We got to meet people all over the world and play with them, and they had jam sessions.
Wow. How many pieces? What was
So that was a 4 and a 5 piece during different incarnations. So it was myself, originally just as a singer, with 2 guitar players, and a bass player and a drummer. Then the other guitar player decided that he knew I played guitar, and he's like, you play better guitar than I do anyways. So he brought his saxophone instead, because he also played sax. And he also did the fun trick where he'd put 2 saxes in his mouth and he could like blow a polychord, which was like a trick of his. Sounded like a freight train. But anyways, and then I started playing guitar in the band as well. And then we had a sax player. He ended up leaving the last year of high school, so then just be in the quartet. But what was nice is around this area, if you played a very like strictly blues, like we did old time blues, like very kind of to the nose. There was actually a lot of venues for that, kind of doing like a shtick, like we did do kind of a shtick,
sure,
which was great. And we rehearsed every week and played every week. And if I was smarter, I should have just kept doing that in college, because I think I made better money doing that than serving coffee.
No, I hear you. The genres that you latched on to early on, were they influenced by your environment, your environment from school? Or your environment, your home environment, sibling, family, what do you recall as maybe your first love for ... genre-wise, and why, like what
The great thing is that I didn't grow up with like musicians. Like my mom's husband at the time played drums, and he's easily the person who probably got me into music the most. He's a huge music lover fan, and he played in like garage bands back in the day. And he always had a kit in the basement. Nice. He loved Dream Theater's drummer Mark Portnoy, and he would literally watch like the instrumental DVDs that he had. Like he'd be sitting in the living room learning the double kick patterns, and but the great thing is we had, I mean, literally probably thousands, and I mean that literally, of CDs. We had cabinets full of CDs. I remember in 2001, I was the first person I knew that had a 500 gigabyte hard drive, which he bought specifically to digitize our music, which we did for like the next 4 months every Saturday morning. Right. We would listen to records all Saturday morning and then just be putting one CD in at a time, and at the time naming all the songs individually. So I would either be typing it in and we'd take shifts, or he'd be reading it, or I'd be reading it and the other person would type it all in, and then we'd find clip art online and add it to the thing. And then he started trading his hard drive with friends at work, and then they would just copy everything and then copy their stuff to it. So by the time I was out of high school, we had like well over a terabyte of music. And I got onto the digital train really fast because he was kind of like a budget hi-fi guy. Yeah. So I got into headphones and iPods and Rios and MP3 players and anything else I get my hands on ahead of time. And I was the kid in elementary school who brought a CD player with him everywhere. I loved music. We listened to a lot of it in the house. Yeah. And the best part is we listened to everything. And I mean everything without a doubt, which was great because there was so much going on that I didn't get stuck to one genre a lot of times. Yeah. I just had this idea that I was like, I can listen to a new song every day of my life and I'll never hear repeat. We have so much stuff that I just wanted to find out was out there. And I'd go like, what's acid jazz? And that was my afternoon now. Or I'd be like, what's hardcore metal distro this or whatever, like other, because the genre list we had always looked hilarious. There was a million genres, and I would just like open up genre folders and put it on shuffle because the iPod was really good at that at the time. But I remember specifically my first thing was kind of the pop punk of the 2000s. I got really into a lot of Spoon and the Kooks and the Killers and all those guys, MCR, of course, Green Day. And then I went through a really big Beatles phase. In fact, I liked the Beatles so much that the first time I went to go sing ever, which was for a musical in junior high, they told me, why are you singing in a British accent? And I realized it's because I had been just singing along to Beatles songs all summer, and that's all I had going on in my head.
It happens to this day. Yeah, people, they'll get it carries somehow.
Yeah, and then the irony is that my musical selection closed down for like 7 or 8 years because when I got into guitar, all of a sudden it was John Mayer, Steve Ray Vaughan, Wes Montgomery, Steve Vai. All the time. That was kind of like my big four. And then there was other people because I would go explore other things and other songs, of course. But those became my big four of inspirations. I listen, and it's such a wide variety. You got someone like Steve Vai who can do all the crazy shredder stuff, but also really interesting instrumental pieces. And then you had kind of the Stevie Ray Vaughan, John Mayer thing, which is closer together, but John Mayer is much more pop accentuted than Stevie, obviously.
Would you say these influences? Go ahead.
Wes Montgomery was jazz, and and not only jazz, but jazz in a very interesting way, because I wasn't interested in out stuff, because his material is so singable. He wasn't going for kind of like dissonant harmony exploration. Okay. Like a lot of jazz players, I think nowadays are aiming for when they think of learning jazz. They're thinking of wanting to take the music beyond what's on the page, kind of idea. Okay. Where the thing about Wes that I think I grabbed to him such a young age was I could listen to any of his solos, and now when I listen back to those albums, I can sing half the solo at least after not hearing it for 10, 12 years.
Wow. He had a lot of pop appeal.
He had a ton of pop appeal.
That was kind of his thing.
And that's the thing is
his label kind of pushed him towards that a little bit too.
When I got to college, a lot of guys were going for really, really hip stuff, and I unapologetically was like, I love Sinatra, Frank Dean, Bublé. I love Wes Montgomery. I was like, I know that this is like the K-pop of the jazz world, but I was like, I unapologetically love this music. Yeah. In fact, I always wanted to be a good enough piano player to go and do crooner tunes and like play for like a fancy place and sing and play, and I just never got my left and right hand up to enough speed. Which is funny because now I'm starting to get good enough with walking bass lines and playing chords on guitar that I'm thinking that I'll finally be able to do that on the guitar instead.
You never, it ended up coming around. So I have a question with regard to those influences, those interests, the things that you were being drawn to. How did your instrument music equipment today begin to build? Where did all that begin? You're hearing these things, and I always find it interesting to, when you see someone's collection, sometimes you can kind of read into what kind of music they're into, right? Yeah. But of course, then you introduce pedals and everything else, and they could have one guitar and be in everything, Where did that begin for you? What was your road? How did your road start?
Funny because
with gear.
One thing is I had been really into audio from a young age, being in the house and everything like that. Mm-hmm. And I remember buying, which is funny because nowadays I know they weren't that nice, but anything above the headphones that come with your iPod or your phone. Yeah. I mean, you don't even get headphones with your phones anymore. But back when you did, anything above that was better. And I remember buying a pair of Bose headphones. And I remember sitting in class one day listening to music, and I just heard a song, and I got goosebumps because all of a sudden there was like a fidelity and a thing that was happening that I had never heard before. Wow. So I was keyed into this idea of like I would listen for these kind of details. And one year when I had first started playing, a friend of the family convinced them that if I was taking it seriously, that, hey, he has this really shitty little practice amp that came with his first guitar. You should get him this. And it was a 212 PV trans tube. And that was okay. I dug that amp. It did some cool things. And then shortly after that, my dad had bought me this giant multi-effects board. And I remember plugging into that. And all through high school, I only ever used that thing as a practice tool because it had a headphone out. That was useful at night. But I just remember plugging into it and trying to use the sounds. But even when I turned all the sounds off, the sound from going straight into my amp versus the sound of going into the pedal board, having nothing on and then going back to the amp, I remember just sounding so different. And I was like, this is weird. I don't like what it's doing. And oftentimes, instead of using the effects, I would just not use it, and I'd plug straight in. Oh. And then a couple years later, I was needing to bring my amp to school every day, and I was 5'3", or something like that, because I was in 7th grade. It was right before I hit my major growth spurt, because I'm like 5'10" now. And I was carrying an 80-pound 212 PV to school every day, up 4 flights of stairs. sometimes 3 or 4 times a week, because I was nuts and I just refused to not do it. And my teacher's like, you should get a smaller amp, and also you should probably get a tube amp. And I was like, okay. So I got a Blues Junior, and then for the next 4 years I had a Blues Junior. Later that year I got a Tube Screamer, and then a Fender Blues Junior. And what was great about that is, with all the players except for probably Steve Vai, that was all the sound I needed. I had an amp that had 3-band EQ, built-in reverb. It had a fat switch and a volume and a gain, so I could decide how clean I wanted the amp to be just from those two and how loud.
Yeah.
And then I had a single dirt pedal on the floor. And that's all I needed. And I would run it off a battery because the school did performances all the time, and they would give me a bag full of used batteries all the time. Yeah. And I had batteries all through high school because I would work tech for shows, and the wireless units had to have a new battery every show. So you would take it home after only used like 2 hours of juice.
Yeah.
So I just used batteries all the time.
What was the guitar you were using at this time?
It was a Schecter CH1 Classic semi-hollow, which was kind of like a poor man's PRS.
So were you trading up, or
I did trade up.
Were you collecting at this point, or still
not yet? Still... That would be a couple of years away, because I did end up collecting a lot of guitars in high school. Okay. Well, once again, my blues band was doing well. I was making more money than a 16-year-old knew what to do with when all they had to pay for was their phone bill and car insurance. And I wasn't saving it. I was buying guitars. But at first, I wanted that Schecter, and I remember it was like $800, and I was going to be in 8th grade was when I was going to get it. And I had scrounged up like a year worth of like mowing lawns and doing some stuff. And then I think I was like 300 shy. And I was basically like, if you guys can do this for my birthday and Christmas, say yes. If I'm asking for too much, say no. That's fine. I'm not expecting you to like up what you would normally get me for a holiday gift. Yeah. And then they asked me to clean my room for like 2 weeks, and I didn't. And then one day I finally went to go do it begrudgingly, and my soft case was heavier than I thought it should be. And I just smacked myself in the head, and I realized that the guitar had been in my room for 2 weeks. And they had went and got it early. And they had hidden it in my room.
What
and
an ode to their patience.
They had been jokingly asking me to clean my room, expecting me to find it, and I was being a crummy kid, and I wasn't doing it. I just sat there.
Lesson learned.
Yeah.
That's an awesome narrative. That's really great. So here you are, and you're starting to formulate a pretty tight gear ensemble. You're loving what you're using.
And I had limited gear, so I felt like I really learned to use my volume with my drives and my amp. I really learned how to dial in the tone controls of my amp to get the sounds I was looking for at the time. Ironically, I would probably never use the tones I used back then now, because I was afraid of bright sounds. I would make everything really dark and smooth because it was easy to play and such like that. And I I wanted a nice pillow to fall back into for all my notes. Nowadays I tend to go for a slightly more revealing sound, which puts you on edge. You got to know what you're doing. I was very particular about it. And
when did you transition from being an accompaniment to driving your own program? Meaning, when did you become the orchestrator of projects, bookings, the band's name, its formulation? Do you remember that? When you really started segueing into,
it was weird.
I'm going to take the lead on this stuff,
I was a band leader on the stage long before I was ever a band leader off the stage.
Okay, right. There we go.
And we've talked a little bit about this before, because when I did like my blues band, and when I did other projects, even when I started playing with groups in college, and I was subbing into groups as guitar players and things like that, it was odd because a lot of people would look to me to make cues on the stage. And I don't know if it's because I was just bullish and I was making them anyways, or if I had a good sense for it, so I could lead groups through changes and things like that. Maybe Dave will let me know if I'm just a bully or what is going on. But
so it wasn't necessarily the instrument, the assignment of instrument, but it was the individual.
Yeah, and I like with the blues band, it was one because I was a singer. I was the lead singer. And as the vocalist, it is easiest for you to lead a song in what direction you'd like to go and dynamically what you'd like to do. And we had a very nice unspoken word where they knew I would lead us through live performances, but I didn't have a big head on me. And as soon as we were done, I took the cap off because it was the drummer's band. He decided the tunes, he decided where we played, and between him and his dad, they were the ones who figured out all the venues we played at and such. Yeah. And then through college, I didn't play a lot of my own projects because it was much more profitable for me to sub in and play with other people's groups, which funny enough is where I started seeing Dave more and more because he was doing the same thing. We met in like Bobby G's band. I know we were playing together. Yeah. And I think some other projects too. Where we were both hired guns and then would go meet each other.
When did you guys meet? About what time?
Well, we met in college before that. But we started seeing each other on the bandstand actually out more often.
I think like 2017, right?
Something like that.
Yeah, 2017 or early 2018.
Now, seeing each other, you mean like crossing paths from gig to get like
actually ending up on the same gigs.
That's what I'm saying.
So not intentionally booking each other. We were ending up on the same bandstand for other people's gigs. And
very cool.
We started crossing paths that way.
Yeah, right. Awesome. Very, very cool.
I don't remember what the question was. Did I answer it?
I think we answered.
I think you got it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, no, what was the question? The question was, when you became a leader.
Yeah.
You know, and I hate the term follower, but, when you went from teammate to coach, if you will, or whatever, you know what I mean? So, I think you nailed it.
Doing the freelancing thing is, that's how a lot of musicians survive too. It can be more lucrative to be the hired gun than always being the band leader sometimes.
Well, it's ironic that I get far less, and the thing is I don't have the schedule open anymore for it, so it's okay, but I get far less cover gigs now because back then I think more people thought of me as a pretty good guitar player, young up and coming guitar player, where over the past handful of years and all the things I do now, I think most people view me now as a front man. So you don't normally hire a front man to fill in. That's just not the case. Sure. And not enough people hire me as a straight up guitar player.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's interesting that now when people think about hiring me, like, unless it's like a fill-in because like I've filled in with the Earharts a couple times now, where the lead singer wasn't available and things like that. So then it made sense to be like, well, the gig has to go on, so I came on there. But for a lot of
so when you did that, you were a vocal.
And in a lot of sense, you're taking a pretty upfront position in the band, where most of the time when you're a hired gun, you're not that. And as viewed as mostly like a big lead now, I don't get nearly as many of those calls as I used to. But also my schedule has changed. So
yeah, interesting. All right, here's a good question. It went over well with Dave. You just received a $5,000 gift card. Mm-hmm.
Can I have it now? Because I know there's an item at a specific store.
To any platform for ordering, right? Music store specific or Web Depots. What would you do today when it comes to it's a gift card for music, gear, anything,
Do the rules still apply that I can add to the pot?
Yes. Yeah. Not what I mean. There you go. There you go. So I would take that, and
the likelihood is if I had 5,000 scotch free. I would likely either do one of two things, which is one, I would call up Denny Kopp in Sandusky and be like, I want you to build my arch top. Here's the deposit. I'll get you the rest when it's finished in 6 months to a year.
And who's that for the listeners?
Jenny Kopp and Sandusky builds Kopp instruments, Kopp guitars, builds wonderful handmade arch tops. It's one man, builds everything from the ground up. Wow. There's no CNC machine, no nothing. He carves the tops by hand.
You tell him what kind of wood and everything, or you leave that up to him?
You can make it as custom as you'd like.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
How do you spell that, or what?
Kopp is Kopp.
Yeah, okay. There you go. Yeah. Very cool. So that's what you do. That's the first thing you
that,
do.
Or I would try and get my hand on a 67 345 because those are current
345.
Well, a 335 from the same era, and I'm going to hurt myself in the foot if someone's listening. But a 335 from that same year is going to cost you somewhere between 14 and 20,000 up, depending on the condition. A 345, which is the same guitar, with a baritone switch, which is normally disabled, because no one liked them and they disabled them over the past 50 years, is the same guitar, and they sit around 7, but definitely under 10.
Yeah.
And I can't justify spending that much. That is nearly twice as much as my most expensive instrument, and that was a stretch for me.
Sure.
So it's like one of those things that like I can't justify buying something like that, but if I had a good chunk of it put away already, I'd have it in a heartbeat, because the prices are only going to go up. And soon they'll be in the stratosphere where I can't justify buying it.
Well, hey, that's the guilt-free part of the question.
That's the best part.
It's genre specific. You can't put it in the bank. You can't buy.
And a little sweetness to it. My teacher growing up has 67 335 that I borrowed from him constantly at school, and he let me as a grubby little teenager play it all the time. An instrument that is still worth far more than my card, like 5 times over.
Yeah.
And I was in love with that guitar, and I'd love to just say, like, because I know he views it as an investment piece, I wish I could be like, hey, I'll buy it. It's going to go to a good home. You know who's going to have it.
That's right.
But I can't give him what it deserves, and he deserves to get what it's worth.
Yeah.
So I'll never own that one, but...
Well, if the market keeps going as it's going, we might see a steep decline in vintage.
Oh, I don't want to rip him off and be like, hey, no, if they're only worth 7, let me get it. Like,
not from him, from some random person on the internet.
I'll rip someone else off for sure.
Yeah.
Nah, we kid.
And there's no random people listening, so we don't have to worry about offending anyone.
No, but that's actually a good point. The vintage market takes sharp increases and declines, almost on its own, like, stock market-esque.
Now, why? I mean,
because we go through different phases of, like, collecting and selling. It's actually very reminiscent of, like, used car markets, as far as, like, if you're trying to buy a 1972 Chevelle or something like that. Like, they're always going to be worth a lot of money. But at this point right now, in 2021 being October versus October 2020, it'd be a very different market. And one of the biggest thing is like world events. So like when COVID hit, a lot of people were selling off their gear because they were
supply and demand comes into play. And now it's flooded. The market's flooded.
You have a huge nostalgia factor, which almost like clockwork. You go 40 years after something was made, people start hitting middle age. These are the things they grew up with. These are the things that they played. These are the things they remember liking as a kid.
Yeah.
And now they have disposable income. People are hitting the peak of their careers often, and the market will drive up on what used to be cheap, affordable, cool gear that you could get, which, like, a lot of times, stuff that's somewhere between 20 and 40 years old, but it's very good, flies under the radar. And that's where it's like, buy used. Look at this thing was a killer piece of equipment and no one wants them anymore, so you buy them. And that's how it always starts.
Sure.
And then that age group catches up with it, and this is the stuff they played, and then the stuff starts to skyrocket. And once it goes up, you get all the speculators, you get all the people who are trying to flip it, and oftentimes you see a climb somewhere for like 5 to 10 years, as long as no other world events happen. And it'll hit a point where it peaks and falls for a while, and then it'll kind of maintain and just gradually go up from there, of course, with everything else. So, you can play the game of the short game of when you see those things happening to see if you can get it up on it. Or you can play the long game of saying, like, this is a... not a historic piece. What's the word I like to? Heirloom piece. As in, if I buy this now, it will only ever go up in terms of the next 20 to 40 years. This is something people will hand down to the next generation. This is worth money. This is worth buying.
Buy your 80s gear now, right?
I mean, now would be the time to go get your gems from the 80s. Because to be fair, the 80s is also known for being a lot of the doggiest stuff from American makers.
Right.
But there's a handful of American things you can buy, and more importantly, there's a lot of Japanese stuff you can buy from that period that is going up.
Weird techie things they were trying to do. Speaking from my own perspective, the PV MIDI bass. You ever hear of that?
No.
It was a MIDI controller bass.
Yeah.
And
that's fine. Steinberg did similar things for guitar at the time.
Yeah, and PV was one of the first to do it. And those you couldn't sell them 20 years ago. Like nobody wants them, and now they're expensive, man.
You hear the same story every time.
Expensive.
Every time, like 70s Fender amps, Silverface amps used to be garbage.
Yeah.
In the 90s and 2000s specifically, you could get Silverface amps for nothing, and everyone treated them like they're garbage. Now they're starting to almost rival Black panels. They're now trying to redefine it. Black panel Fender amps of the 60s. Like they're nearly reaching those prices.
What's driving that? Between the two, the
nostalgia.
PV MIDI.
The older something gets, the more desirable it is because there's so few of them left on the market.
It's not a sound that it produces that is now in demand, or can't be replicated, or
When you go to
there has to
certain
be a
things
reason
like,
why everybody was dogging it, and then it's now like. Yeah, I need that sound.
Now, the sound of like a vintage instrument is things that truly can't be replicated until it gets that old. I will say that much. So like just the pickups, for example, they start to degauss themselves. The wax that they're dipped in starts to deteriorate. Like things that simply can't be replicated without true, honest to God age. That is a sound, and that is a very specific sound that can't be fully replicated. But sometimes, no, it's not really a sound they're chasing. Sometimes they're just looking for like, ooh, I want to look the part of the 90s. I want to look the part of the 70s or something like that.
Yeah.
And of course, like I said, the collector fear of missing out starts to kick in of like, ooh, well, I don't have that piece yet in my collection. Yeah. It seems like some people now do, so I should get one, and then all of a sudden people start to buy those sorts of pieces that wouldn't already been sought after.
Yeah, and then there's interesting things where it's like, for a long time, amps of the 70s and 60s were often viewed, some of the ones before the prices skyrocketed, they're often viewed as a poor man's way or a smarter way to get a hand-wired amp. Because by the time you get to the 80s, everything's on a PCB board, basically. Yeah. And I'm not going to get into the minutia of how people feel about PCB boards. But the point is, there's a handful of people who don't want them. And the point is that if you went before then, everything was hand-wired, basically, except for a handful of Marshalls. But for the most part, everything was hand-wired. Mm-hmm. And if you wanted a hand-wired amp today, you're like starting at like almost $2,000. So it's like, if I can buy an old, cool piece of gear that might even go up in value over time, then that's the first wave of people who go buy that stuff. Yeah. And because it's a bargain and it's cheaper than the new. And then you get the nostalgia crowd that comes in as well. Yeah. And then you get all the people who jump on it. You get all the speculators. You get all that kind of stuff going through. And then you'll see like a market like that explode. Oh, so it'll be very interesting to see how the 80s and 90s go, because some of that technology, I'm not sure if it will age as well, because it's also not as repairable, which will be very interesting to see how that market goes.
Well, let me ask about your gear too. Anyways. Like your current, hey, it's all knowledge, with your current gear collection, what's your favorite pairing to play with right now? If you're going to gig.
I mean, if volume allows for it, I love being able to bring out my Matchless and my Strat still. I mean, my Strat is my number one. And God willing, when my board is all working in working order, FedEx has been a pain recently. Yeah. But I bring out my main board, and I've got my Strat, and I've got that. If the stage is big enough, I haven't gotten to it yet because outdoor stuff hasn't taken off the way I'd like it to. I bring that, and I have a 60s twin with old Alnico Altec speakers in it that I had customly reconed for me to my specs. Wow. So like I have now I have that amp and another cabinet that I have custom speakers in, which is a bit minutia for a lot of players. They don't go into that depth.
Yeah.
And I've just been lucky enough to know someone who's very passionate about speaker reconing. And I didn't do it just for fun. I blew the speakers. And when we were repairing them, we made decisions. But I would run that in a dual mono setup. That'd be my way to go.
And then in that same...
in a stadium for that.
that is a lot of firepower.
Yeah.
That's a lot of firepower right there. But that'd be my ultimate. And I've gotten to run that a handful of times just at the house. For smaller gigs, I'm often doing my Princeton, sometimes my Princeton and my Little Mesa, or my Princeton and my Laney, which is kind of a Voxy thing. I'm in the market for like an AC-15 style in the future, which will be like my mini version of the Matchless and Twin. So Fender and Vox sound. Yeah. So I'm going for a smaller version of the Fender Vox sound at a lower volume.
What's your favorite type of gig?
Ooh. My favorite type of gig is when the audience is just paying attention, when they're digging it.
Yeah.
I love when the audience is just having a good time because, this weekend I just did top 40 wedding stuff.
Yeah.
Nothing fancy.
Does that ever lend to a type of venue?
We had a crowd that was just loving it. And that's my thing.
So it's not venue.
I love the infectious feeling you get when they are digging everything you're doing. And at that point, I could be playing Ring Around the Rosie,
I think
almost feels like.
I'm just all feel that way.
I love being able to entertain, and I love getting the reactions off
connection.
them. And, you get to the point where... and as a front man, you get a lot of this. So, you're a lot of eyes are on you. So this is a slightly selfish thing to be able to enjoy. But it's like I can get to the point at the night where it's like when you sing a note just right, you get the oohs and ahs from the crowd. When you play the lick just right, you can get them applauding halfway through a solo. When you do the hair flip at one point because there's sweat in your eye and it hurts, then they're like, what? When you can get reactions out of everything, like it just becomes so malleable, and it's so much fun, even if at the end of the night your ears are ringing and like everything else, and those are great. And now if I had to pick a second after that, it would be a gig that allows me to stretch in a way. I also like those a lot. Ironically, they're the gigs when almost no one's paying attention to you, which means I'm likely getting paid okay, but we're mostly background music. But I'm also kind of free to do whatever I want. Like, I've been given just full reign to kind of just have fun because this isn't like an important event or gig or...
I love the rare overlaps where you can stretch a bit.
Yeah.
And the audience is like really digging what you're doing. Like,
those are great.
We kind of got that from that concert when we played right before Good, Bad, and Blues not too long ago. That felt like a nice... rare crossover where we were playing top hits but also stretching on them, and also the audience, it was like we couldn't hit a wrong note. That was cool.
It was good. And it's hard because like with that group I sell myself as a power trio, so it's like we are not a dance band. I'm gonna play a lot of guitar. I'm gonna play a lot of it loud, and like
sure,
that's not everyone's cup of tea, and like to win over an audience in that sense is like when you get that event, it's nice.
Yeah, it's like ooh, yeah, I get it totally. Well, we all survived the pandemic, or the Great Experiment, as I like to call it, which is still ongoing, but
very much so.
Devin Krueger 2021. What's going on?
I'm just want to make it to the end of the year.
Yeah.
It's been a busy fall. Which I'm happy. I'm so happy. But unfortunately, fortunately, I don't have a ton of things on the calendar for people to go to. We do a lot of private events.
Yeah.
We're getting through those. I've got a lot of duo bookings because earlier in this year when I was afraid no one would let us play anywhere, I just went out and booked like crazy solo and duo gigs. Yeah. So we're gonna finish those out. We're gonna knock all those out.
Few them ourselves.
We got our we got our weekly stint doing the jam, and like I've obviously got like a church gig every Sunday, and I've got weddings all the way through November and part of December.
Well, it's a good plug for the OT every Tuesday.
OT every night. I mean, for by the way, a professional musician, getting yourself a weekly gig, you will not realize what that does for you until you got that going for you, because it's one thing for you to be like, well, I do this band and we play a couple dozen times a year or something like that. And it's like, well, when you have a weekly gig, 52 gigs on the plate immediately.
Yep.
as a professional musician as well. You got a church gig, 104 gigs a year. Both of those are set. Mm-hmm. You have nearly a third of the year.
Man.
Just like 365 days, you've got 104 done. And it's like, on top of that, I'm doing 40 plus weddings this year. So it's like, that's 140 right there.
Yeah.
And I don't keep a spreadsheet nearly as well as Dave does, so I don't know what my year turnout is like. But it's like, I know that there was like a 2-month span that I just got out of where I had a gig or a session almost every single day for 2 months. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know what those numbers are looking like right now. But
how do we find you? Where do we go to find out what's going on in your world and what's next?
Type in Devin, Devin, Krueger, Krueger, like Freddy. Type it into Google. You will find all the things that I'm attached to, which is mostly the Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Yeah. The website is on the way. But in general, I post everything on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and that's always where I'm playing, where I'm uploading, where I'm keeping everything up to date, so that way you know where I'm playing. And
so you guys are both available. Are you taking on students? Both being instructors at this point? So. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you're both...
I didn't even mention that I teach.
Yeah, I know. I'm always trying to
get all the side hustles.
Well, here come the part twos again.
Right.
Dave thought of something. I just thought of something. Devin just thought of something.
Yeah, we were just talking on the break. I forgot to reference the Red Hot Chili Peppers as one of my biggest influences.
Yeah, well, and they're coming to town.
We were talking about listening with Dave, and I remember thinking, I was like, I got something to say for that. Which was like when it comes to listening to music now, when I can't on my own time. I don't. Forgive me, listeners, if I've already said this in a past podcast, but my favorite thing I've been doing since 2016 now is I have a monthly playlist every month, and what I do with that playlist is anything that piques my curiosity in the folder. An artist piques my curiosity. I go find not a song. I find an album. Throw it in the folder.
See where they went with that.
I go to a jam and someone's telling me about an artist. Throw it in the folder. Because I'm surrounded by musicians. So I was constantly getting people telling me stuff to listen to. And I would never remember it. Like the next morning or later on, things like that. So I just got in the habit of right in front of them being like, who'd you say?
Right.
What album? Which one? Which one should I check out first? And like now. And I put it in and I listen to that and with all my free time. And I don't get to it all the time. I still get to it at least once or twice a week. I was getting in the habit of doing it like 3 or 4. But
it's better to have a library than...
I don't wake up easily. So what I would do is I would wake up just enough, roll out of bed, grab my phone, put on a new album I've never heard before, put it back, put in my AirPods, and lay down and close my eyes and listen to a full album cover to cover. And then by the end of it, I was feeling up enough to get up out of bed. And the thing is the likelihood of me falling back asleep or doing anything useful with that first hour was so small that now it's like I've started my day off by listening to something completely new, and I was intently listening. And it's been a great little habit to kickstart my days along with like the monthly playlist.
Yeah, very cool.
And things like Spotify nowadays are amazing where I will find a song or an artist that I love or an album and I'll go to the radio function of it and I'll spend like an hour for fun going through all the songs in that radio and then finding those artists, and I go through this rabbit trail of each one, and then I'm adding those into the new monthly. And then by the end of the month, I go and whatever I didn't get a chance to listen to, or whatever I really want to keep listening to, I start throwing that stuff in the following month.
Yeah, once I stopped going to stores to buy CDs, which would entail 30 plus minutes of looking around, that's what it became. It became, well, what's attached to this and what are the suggestions from that? I can totally associate to that, for sure. I mean, that's...
Yeah, especially because I listen to some pretty niche things sometimes as a guitar player, and you can sometimes fall in love with someone and realize there's like 3 or 4 bands in the world who kind of sound like this thing. And they only have a handful of albums, so like you start really deep diving through those lists to be like, I loved that. Is there any more of that?
Yeah.
And, when you find yourself in some of those more niche projects, like those features are so helpful, and I'm so happy I'm living in today where we're able to do that.
Yeah. Well, there you have it, Devin Krueger, today's artist highlight. Well, there you have it, Devin Krueger. today's artist highlight. Guys, thanks for participating.
Absolutely.
All right. Continued successes, obviously, to you both. And thanks for the interview, Devin.
Yeah. I'm sure mine was longer than Dave's. I tend to be long-winded.
It's okay. Hey, you know. All right. From Laserlight, we are out.
This has been Laserlight Presents All About the Gig.